My name is Justin Dujardin. I'm one of the account executives here at Revelwood. I'm joined by my colleague, Haley Elliott, who's going to be showing you an overview demo of adaptive planning here just in a few minutes. I do want to take a few minutes to give you an idea of what to expect out of today's webinar. I only have a few slides, but adaptive planning is a place where you can do your modeling, reporting, and analytics all in one place. So everything that you need is in one solution, and it will act as your central source of truth, if you will. And typically we're talking with finance teams, and of course we're pulling in the general ledger data, but adaptive can connect to really any data source that you need it to, because at the end of the day, data is data, and you'll be able to bring all of that data together into one place to model and report on with confidence. Get to the next slide here. So this slide gives you an idea of many of the areas of the business that you can model and plan using adaptive. It's very flexible. It's not limited to the core FP&A. You can model out really any operational area of the business that you want with adaptive. Now, adaptive runs on, it's a fancy name, Elastic Hypercube technology. This is a patented Workday technology, and this is a key competitive differentiator. I'm not going to talk about technical specifics because it really isn't important, but the reason it is key is because it makes the solution scalable and able to have an unlimited number of dimensions, an unlimited number of versions, scenarios, while still keeping the solution really easy to use. It's intelligent, so when your system needs more processing power, the system expands to give it to you only when you need it. But what's equally important is that you have this power without losing that ease of use and maintainability. As you'll see in the demo today, everything is extremely intuitive with drag and drop functionality that the end users can own this system without assistance from IT, which is really big for a lot of our customers and why 97% of customers retain the solution. And that's why Adaptive has over 6,500 customers now globally in all industries, which is more than double our closest competitor. And as you can see, once again, it's across many different industries. And finally, before I pass it to Haley to give you this overview demonstration, some highlights on the Workday side. Of course, this product is backed by Workday, which is a $6 billion company. They're continuously reinvesting into the product. They reinvest 35% of revenue back into the product. It was ranked Gartner's Customer's Choice for 2023 for financial planning solutions. It was ranked #1 on Fortune's Future 50 list, and also #2 on Forbes' World's Most Innovative, which includes companies like Tesla, Apple, and Google. So that really speaks volumes to how Workday is investing into the future and the value that customers are getting and why they're retaining the solution at a 97% rate. So I'll pass it over to Haley at this point.
Cool. Thanks, Justin. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for everybody. So like Justin mentioned, my name is Haley Elliott. I'm one of our pre-sales solutions consultants here at Revelwood. Exclusively work with Workday Adaptive Planning, and I've been working with the solution for about 3 years now, and actually started as an implementation consultant. So I've led entire implementations for basically every industry and use case you could think of, whether that's finance, which we're going to see today, or supply chain use cases, workforce planning. So that just means if you have questions as we go along, please feel free to pop them in the chat, and I'll try to get to as many as I can. If I don't get to it, then I'll be sure to follow up. But with that, we're going to go ahead and dive in. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is the only slide I have for you. This is our agenda for today. So as you can see, we don't have a ton of time, so I'm going to keep it a little bit high level and just cover general functionality, that kind of thing. So we are going to start with basics. How do we navigate through the system? How do we get data in? From there, we'll move more into active dashboards and how you can actually use visuals to guide your end users through the planning process. From there, we'll go into financial statements. I am going to focus on the P&L today, but just know we do typically build a full 3 financial statement forecast. And by 3, I mean you can have a direct or an indirect cash flow or both. So I guess you could technically do 4. And then we'll finish up with both workforce planning and 2 different types of reporting in Adaptive, so the ad hoc reporting and Office Connect. That's today in a nutshell, so I'm going to go ahead and pop over into Adaptive. So this is my home screen when I come into Adaptive. I say my home screen because you can customize this on an end user by end user basis. So whatever is going to be most valuable for an end user to see, whether that's a summary dashboard like I'm seeing now, if they want to go straight to a budgeting template they constantly update, or just a sheet with key KPIs, something along those lines, you can customize that on an end user by end user basis. And that's going to be true for basically every screen we go to. So 2 things you're going to see on every screen are levels and versions. So your levels are typically going to be your organizational structure. So your entities, your cost centers, your departments. If you're multinational, you'll put your different locations here. And the idea is the level structure acts as kind of your first line of security in Adaptive. So typically what you'll do is say for our Sales North manager, I'll assign that individual to the level they're responsible for. And then every single dashboard, sheet, and report is going to be automatically filtered to that level. So that's going to be important for 2 reasons. 1, like I mentioned, security. You don't want people viewing, let's say, salary detail. They should not have permission to. And 2, it's going to help with user adoption because everyone knows exactly where they need to go. As you make changes at lower levels as well, as I'm kind of coming in and budgeting for Sales North, that'll actually aggregate automatically up through the level structure as well. So you're not waiting on business rules. You're not manually consolidating 60 different Excel files, which we all hate doing. The level structure will take care of all of that for you. So the other thing that I mentioned was versions. Versions are unlimited and adaptive. So primary use cases for versions are holding multiple different iterations of your budget. So instead of having 20 different Excel workbooks floating around V2, V6, and no one really knows what version they should actually be in, this is a really nice way to organize that budgeting process. And then also start getting into a rolling forecast, your 2+10s, your 3+9s, that kind of thing. You can load in as much data as you want. That will not change your Adaptive subscription at all. I have one client that has 11 terabytes of data, still perfectly fine performance. And I know that's usually shocking for a lot of people. You don't have to have that much data. That just gives you an idea of how far you can scale with the platform. The last thing on versions is you'll notice quite a few of these have lock icons at the bottom. That just indicates it's a version that's maybe been board approved, something like that. And it's locked down so that end users can't make changes to the data in that version, but they are still able to copy it over into let's say a new version, or actually view it, pull it into reports, that kind of thing. So those are going to be levels and versions. I did see a question on this pop up. Can you have different level access and summary dashboards for different users? Yes, you can. One user might have access to all of North America. Another one might just have the sales department in North America. And then you can have as many dashboards as you want that display different kind of KPIs and graphs for different groups or individual users. So great question. So that's going to be the basics here. The last thing I kind of want to walk through before we go into what we're seeing on the screen here is just navigation, kind of our final basic for today. Your entire planning, reporting, and analytics process is all in one pane right here. So if we just quickly step through the options, you should hopefully see that there's not a missing element that you're going to have to sign into another system to kind of complete any of those pieces I just mentioned. Sheets are going to be your kind of working screens. Think the templates that you're entering in, maybe your software contracts, planning for revenue. It's probably going to be where your end users spend most of their time doing their actual budgets. Assumptions are all of your key drivers. So these are going to be things like average sales prices if you're in a tangible goods industry, any of your workforce assumptions, whether that's country specific or maybe your standard FICA, FUTA, SUI, that kind of thing. Reports will come back to. We aren't going to go into consolidations today, but just do know we do have a module that handles intercompany eliminations if you don't have that capability in your ERP. We do also have a process tracker and workflow. But the two places I wanted to kind of dig into a little bit, and then we'll move into dashboards, are integration and support. So there are two different ways to kind of get data into the system outside of just keying it into a sheet. And that's going to be automated integration and manual imports. So automated integration, we are data agnostic. So that means we can literally connect to any source system you have. You are not limited to just bringing over your GL balances and transactions. But if you're in healthcare, we can integrate EMR data. For professional services, we can bring hours data over or live project data from like a Microsoft projects or something like that. So you want to start thinking outside of just being able to leverage your financial data, but thinking of how you can blend other kind of data sources in to enrich that financial data. So how this automated integration works is we'll connect directly to whatever source system you have or source systems. You have unlimited integration in Adaptive, and then we'll set up tasks to automatically load that data, usually on a nightly basis, but you are able to do it automatically as quickly as every 15 minutes. You can change those schedules. So maybe month end, you want it to run every 15 minutes, but during the middle of the month, you're fine with it just loading nightly. Takes maybe 2 or 3 minutes to reload everything or refresh, and no one's kicked out of the system. If during month end, maybe a big transaction just got posted or something, then you are able to come into these tasks and just click a run button to refresh the data on demand. So lots of flexibility there for data automation. On the other hand, if you have a different data source that you're maybe only going to bring data over once a week or once a month. An example of that might be your employee roster from your HR system. You might just choose to manually import a file. So right here on manual import, you have the option to upload CSV files or Excel files. So it's literally taking your sales detail or anything like that and importing it directly into Adaptive. It'll even generate a template for you. Okay, so that's kind of the two main ways that we'll integrate data in the system or mass import. I'll kind of talk about sheet interaction in a little bit. Cool. And then the last option here that I wanted to address was just support. So you do have a ton of support available directly in Adaptive. This tool is meant to be owned by finance without the need to rely on IT. So you have access to product documentation. You can submit requests to Workday's support team, which you'll have access to 24/7, 365. And then you also have a little question mark here at the top that you can always click into. It's a context-dependent knowledge base, and it's just going to guess what you need help with based on where you are in the system. Okay, so it's kind of support and data integration in a nutshell. We can definitely go into individual source systems and how you would integrate them in follow-up. But I'm going to go ahead and dig a little bit into the actual budgeting and planning process in Adaptive. So we're going to start with dashboards. Dashboards in Adaptive are called active dashboards for a couple of reasons. The first two actually are that you can click into any dial or graph or scorecard you see on a dashboard and actually understand where that data is coming from. So net revenue in this case, I can come in, click on that number, and I'm going to have two options. The first is just to explore data. So I'm going to go ahead and see any dimensional detail associated with my revenue numbers. I can actually follow that number all the way through to the planning model that's generating it. So my dashboard visual is on the same exact database as my plan data, that model. So I can always navigate back to the inputs from my outputs. And then lastly, I have access to an audit trail, which will just tell me who's been making changes to my data, when they made the change, and what the change was. So really nice way is you bring budget managers into the system to keep track of what changes they're actually making. The other option here was a dimensional drill down. So these are automatically generated. I just call that out because a lot of solutions are going to make you code this in or make you decide how you want to drill down during implementation. With Adaptive, as soon as I add a new dimension to my revenue, it's going to automatically appear in this list. So if I want to know what products we're selling, I can go ahead and drill in. I can start seeing what customers are purchasing a specific product, that kind of thing. So again, this is more on the tangible goods side of the house, but we can do the same thing with services. If you want to bring in census data to drive revenue, anything along those lines. So lots of flexibility. The other reason these are called active is that you can bring your planning models directly onto dashboards. So this is going to be important for two reasons. First is just scenario analysis. So if I am at my sales north department, let's say, and I want to know what happens if maybe we were a little over ambitious about how many units customer one is going to purchase this year, and we want to find out what happens if we maybe have them purchase 12% less. I'll go ahead and make that change and answer that what if question pretty much immediately. So as soon as I make that change, you see a little refresh across all of these dials. And that's just showing again that your planning models are on the same platform as these data visualizations. So there's not a concern about, are all of my visuals up to date or all of my reports up to date? Second reason this is important is because if you have people on your team who are very visual during the budgeting process, this is a really nice way to just set up different steps of your budget process through tabs and give them kind of the best of both worlds. So yes, they'll have the spreadsheet, but they'll also have all of these visuals to assist in the planning process. Last two things on dashboards, you can set these up to be sent out on an automatic basis. So if you want your CFO to get this snapshot every Monday morning in his or her inbox, you can set that schedule up to happen automatically. And building these out is pretty easy as well. There is no coding in Adaptive. It's all click and drag. So here I came in to edit a dashboard. I have a bunch of charts over here, and literally all I have to do is drag on my chart, and Adaptive's just going to ask me, what account do you want to display? So yes, I have my GL balances here, but maybe I want to display some sort of operational data or some workforce data, something along those lines. So whatever data points you have in the system, Adaptive, like Justin said, interprets data as data. So you're going to be able to display whatever is relevant for you. Okay, so that's dashboards. And as I mentioned, you can have a bunch of different dashboards for a bunch of different groups. I have quite a few in this instance, from sales to workforce planning to finance to basic human resources, and all of these will be assigned to different user groups. Okay. We're gonna go ahead and jump into the financial statements, which I believe there was actually a question about, so hopefully this will answer it. What you're about to see on the screen is just a general P&L. So a couple of things you'll notice right away are green numbers and black numbers. Green numbers are my actuals data coming in from a NetSuite, an Intact, an SAP, any ERP you may have. Black data is our plan or budget data. So That plan data is going to come from a couple of different places. The first is you're going to see on the screen a lot of cells actually with little blue carrots at the bottom. That means there's a calculation on those cells that's calculating that number. Calculations in Adaptive are quite similar to Excel syntax. So you can see same operator and everything, even the if statements, if you want to get fancy, operate pretty much the same. The main difference or kind of learning curve here is that instead of saying A2 times B 4010, which honestly means nothing when you read it, we're using account names. So think of this as like named ranges in Excel almost that are actually going to tell me I am taking my FTE account times a telephone per head reimbursement assumption. And people can even leave comments if they want as they're making these formulas. Now, like I said, I know this is a very simple formula. You also have access to a formula assistant. If you want to do something more complicated, I've done pretty complex allocations in the manufacturing space utilizing formulas and Adaptive. So if we can accomplish that, I'm confident we can accomplish pretty much anything you need. You'll also notice a couple of red triangles or red carrots on some of these cells. That's just highlighting that collaboration is very important to us in Adaptive. And so as people are coming in and doing their budgets, they can right click, add a note, and all of those notes will aggregate at the bottom of a report that we'll see later. So you aren't hunting cost center through cost center to actually be able to explore all of the commentary that people have left. One other thing that you can do on this type of sheet is if you know, let's say a department head knows for new hire training that they have a budget of $16,000 for this year, they can key that in. And Adaptive has a bunch of native financial intelligence that will actually give you options to break that number back. So in this case, I can say, hey, Adaptive, take last year's seasonality and apply it to this value. And you can see that 16,000 has been broken back based on the actuals from last year. And consequently, when this cash is actually going to go out. So it's a nicer way to fine tune your forecast. And again, Adaptive is actually maintaining that seasonality in the background for you. You see a couple of charts on the side. And if I really wanted to, I could do everything from version comparison to add bar charts on the side. All of this is going to be user specific. So if someone doesn't want the visual on the side, they can take it off for themselves. Very customizable on an end user by end user basis. So last point on financial statements is just going to be that you, again, just to reiterate that if I'm making all of these changes at Sales North, as I save, they'll go ahead and roll up the structure. Okay. We're going to go ahead and look at one of the other ways that we might plan for one of these line items, and that's through what we would call a supporting schedule. So supporting schedules are just other sheets that are providing a lot more detail behind several of these line items. Most commonly, we'll see a personnel sheet behind our salary and wages. So if I just explore cell, we're actually going to follow this all the way back through to my personnel sheet, and I'll take a look at that. One thing I do want to call out is there is a checkbox on every user's permission called salary detail permission. If they don't have that, they're not going to see the bottom half of this Cell Explorer. They will only see the total employee burden for their department. So we do have a lot of options for security. I'm going to go ahead and follow this through to our workforce planning sheet though. So this is an example of what we would call a modeled sheet in Adaptive. Modeled sheet, the nomenclature isn't that important. The main thing to think of here is it's column based. So I can bring whatever columns I want onto a sheet like this. Right now I'm looking at it in personnel, but we'll also use this to track vendor contracts. If you're a SaaS company, we'll bring your CRM data into a sheet like this. So you are truly choosing whatever intersections you want to plan by. Couple of things on this sheet. You'll see a few drop downs, which are referring back to one of those assumption sheets I mentioned earlier. If we choose New York for an individual, it's going to pull all the state specific tax rates for them. You'll also notice I have 2 lines for will here. That's because we have the ability to allocate employees across departments, projects. If you're in the life sciences industry, maybe you allocate individuals across clinical trials, anything along those lines. You can have Adaptive automatically split an individual's employee burden across any dimension or level. All of the calculations on this type of sheet do happen in the back end. So all you have to do is right click, and for Melanie, I want to see all of her personnel calculations. So right here, all of these calculations are completely configurable. So we'll work with you to figure out exactly how what calculations are going to be most relevant for you. One thing I do always like to call out though is just you'll notice for Melanie, 2 of her taxes cut off here in June. That's because she's hit her maximum, and Adaptive recognizes that, hey, we do not need to register an employer tax for this anymore until the start of the next fiscal year. So that'll happen automatically. And this is just one example of that kind of min-max logic. You are able to apply that to other situations as well. If you are in professional services, maybe you use that for utilization so that you aren't going over a certain amount of utilization for a certain role, something along those lines. I do know a couple of people had sent in questions earlier about kind of how this works with HCM. So you do not have to have Workday HCM to be able to bring your personnel roster data in. If you do, though, you are going to have the additional functionality to submit new hire requests that are made in Adaptive back into HCM and kind of kick off that approval process for a new job requisition. So it's a little bit more cyclical when you have HCM. For those of you who don't, though, that same integration that I mentioned earlier applies. So it's going to be pretty similar functionality. Once you have that roster in here as well, you are going to be able to make changes to it. So we're not just bringing static data in and leaving it static. You can go ahead and add a new row. If you know you're going to hire someone for a similar position, just copy it and change the start date, anything along those lines. So lots of flexibility here. One thing I'll also note is that I'm showing an individual-based planning model. This can absolutely be role-based. So if you have field workers or a position that usually has high turnover, you can also do this by role and just tell the system how many FTEs you have or are projecting to have in that role. Okay, so it's going to be workforce planning, a very light intro. We can definitely go deeper on that. I do want to make sure we get to reporting though, and then I'll handle a couple of questions that have come in. So there are 2 additional types of reporting in Adaptive. The first is going to be web reports, which are accessed right here. So I'm going to go ahead and open 2 up. These are going to be your kind of ad hoc, I want to get a report in a minute or 2 and just look at how we're tracking against budget. So my budget versus actuals. A lot of our clients will also put this as the final step in a process, so that as department heads are going through and making adjustments to all these numbers, the last screen they see is this, and they have to come in and add in notes to actually explain any variances that appear for their department on this report. So really nice way to kind of cap off the budgeting process. In terms of functionality, if you remember those red carrots from the P&L a few minutes ago, all of those are now aggregating at the bottom here. I personally like them out of mind, out of sight, but if you really want to be able to see them at the same time as your data, you can also just put them over here on the side and review everyone's comments at once. You'll notice I have currency. Adaptive does have foreign exchange capabilities, so that's handled through the level structure. And if you want to see a different currency, it's pretty easy to do that. In terms of what you can do with this report, that same drill down functionality that I showed on the dashboards applies here too. So if you see kind of a wild variance like we do here, I can click into actuals. And instead of having to ping accounting about why this actuals number is so high or go back into my ERP, I can just drill directly into transactional detail in Adaptive. So cool thing here, streamlines process, make sure you aren't having to go in between multiple different systems, and we can bring in whatever columns you'd like into the transactions table. So if you'd like customer level detail, project level detail, product for product profitability, anything like that, we can absolutely have that show up in this table for you. Okay. One other piece of functionality here is if you click on any account, you're going to have the option to pivot this entire report by any dimension you have in the system. So I obviously have a lot because I do a lot of demos. Some of my clients have 20, some of my clients have 200. But right here, you'll actually see I'm now looking at that salary and wages account by different buckets of my cost centers. So just clicked on function, and I now have sales and marketing, R&D, G&A for that same account without having to go through and kind of manually splice out that data or regroup that data. You can download these as Excel and PDF, although like I mentioned, you do get up to 1,000 view-only users. So you could just have people come directly into the system and look at reports based on their security access. Lastly here, if I come in to edit, if I have that permission, this is the back end of that report, which probably looks a lot simpler than you might have expected from those capabilities that I showed. So on the left here, you have every element that exists in Adaptive. So all of your dimensions, all of your organizational structure, your cost centers, and every single account. So if you want to dimensionalize this report or add another account, all you have to do is drag it over. So pretty straightforward. You're not dealing with MDX coding or JavaScript. I personally never took a CS class anytime in college. And can still build out this entire system for some of the largest clients you can think of. So pretty easy to pick up. In terms of one other report that CFOs usually find particularly interesting, we'll almost always build out a 3 financial statements report. So right now we see our income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow numbers all stacked on top of each other here. Looking at prior year actuals and 2 versions of my budget. And then at the bottom, though, I also have some pretty common financial ratios that a lot of you are probably interested in. So cash, current ratio, debt ratio, whatever is most relevant for you, we can calculate. And this is really just a nice way to highlight that you're not restricted, again, to just displaying your GL balances. You're also able to add in additional operational detail or statistical accounts like we see down here. So that's a really quick overview of web reports. Obviously, there's a lot more you can do here, so you can definitely follow up on that. But I do want to make sure we get to Office Connect. So Office Connect is the 3rd type of reporting or visualization in Adaptive. And this is going to be our plugin to Microsoft Office 365, which means Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. The primary use case for this is going to be those more formatted board reports. If you have specific bank reports that you need to create, things that honestly need to be a little bit prettier and a little more standardized. So you do retain full Excel functionality, as you see up here, lots of formatting capabilities. If I actually highlight linked cells, blue cells are linked directly to Adaptive. So all of the data, all of the changes, your actuals, your plan data that you're storing in Adaptive is directly accessible through Office Connect. And as you can see, I just explored cell and we're seeing that, again, same cell explorer open up in Adaptive. So even still, I can get from my board report directly in to ask or to answer any questions about, well, why is this number this? Green cells are dynamic labels. So as I roll this forward, those will go ahead and automatically update. But what's also cool about Office Connect is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you already have reports formatted how you like them, all you have to do is take that existing report. You'll have all of your elements over here from Adaptive. Hopefully this looks similar to the web reporting pane we were just on. And all you need to do is click and drag whatever accounts you want to make dynamic on your existing report. From there, we'll just need to refresh this report. But while I'm doing that, I also want to get next month's board report. So right now we're looking at March. If we're coming up on the April kind of board meeting and I want to go ahead and update this report, all I need to do is come into workbook properties. I'll go ahead and roll the report date forward a month. Click OK, refresh. And you're going to see all that data I just dragged on populate. And now I'm looking at a trailing 6 from April. So trailing 6, actuals year to date, anything along those lines, refresh pretty quickly. This usually gives a lot of relief for finance teams who are spending several hours or days putting together these reports. You can expand for some ad hoc analysis if you'd like to, either by account, by cost center, by a dimension. And if you want to create this type of report for multiple cost centers or locations, you can come up here to repeating reports. Pick however you want to slice and dice this. I'm just going to do 3 of our countries here. And then at the bottom, you're going to see 3 new tabs. Adaptive is automatically splitting out all of that data. So I now have a formatted P&L for France, Canada, the US, and still my total company. And just as a few other examples, I could do this at a departmental level. If you want to do sales or revenue data, your balance sheet metrics, get the idea. If it's in Adaptive, then we can bring it into Office Connect. And as I mentioned, this also does apply in Word and PowerPoint as well. So I do know we have a ton of questions that Justin is also answering for y'all. Just one quick one that I see are the P&L forms formatted to print. Yes, you can either pull them down into Excel like I just showed, or any of those sheets. There's a download button in the toolbar to download as Excel or PDF. And no, there is not a number of like a limitation to the number of currencies you can have in the system. We do have constant currency reporting through what we call virtual versions. That's actually very common for our multinational companies to leverage. So yes to both of those additional currency questions. So that's all for me. I'll go ahead and pass it back to Justin.
Yep, thank you, Haley. Certainly hope that everybody got great value out of this webinar. We encourage you to learn more about Revelwood and our implementation approach by visiting our website at revelwood.com. While you're there, you can visit our Knowledge Center where we offer tips and tricks about all aspects of the planning process, technical tips on the tool, planning tips about the budgeting process, and various tips on other business aspects of your FP&A model. Certainly make sure to follow up with us if you have further questions or interest in regards to adaptive planning specifically. We really appreciate you attending. Either myself or one of our colleagues will probably be following up with you for a 15-minute follow-up call. And we would really appreciate if you would take the time to share some feedback with us and give us any questions or thoughts that you have. So hopefully you will take the time. Let us know how else we can help. We really appreciate you attending, and we'll see you soon.